I never thought I'd share this, but life throws you into unexpected situations. My name is Elise, and I'm 43 years old. I've been a single mum for a year. I have been raising my son on my own for a long time. His name is Lenny, and he is now 23 years old. We have always been close, just the two of us helping each other, supporting each other through life's ups and downs. One night, something unexpected happened. Lenny looked really tired and he said he wasn't feeling well. He had been working hard and he looked worn out. I told him he could lie down and go to bed. If he wanted to rest, he could go to bed for a while. It was a cold night in our house. I put something heavy on him to warm him up. At first, it looked like he had a blanket over him. Normally, it's just a mother helping her son, but then when I lay down next to him, I felt him. He must have tried to come closer. I warmed up and didn't think too much, but then he put his arms around me, gently pulling me towards him, just like he did. When was that? If you want me to tell you the rest of my life, please subscribe to my channel so I can feel good and continue. Thanks in advance. He probably just needed comfort. I could feel his warmth next to me, his steady breathing. I felt it as I lay there. Lenny's breathing seemed to slow down as he fell asleep, and the room was very quiet. I could hear my own heartbeat. It felt strange but calming at the same time. I didn't move because I didn't want to disturb him and me. I told myself that it was just a mother, consoling her son, but then shifting even as he moved again. Closer to me under the blanket, I felt her arm wrap around me a little tighter, and for a moment I froze, unsure. A part of me that didn't know what to think. I wanted to say something and walk away, but someone else, a part of me, remained immobilized there. I couldn't handle the tension in the air. I ignored it and didn't know why I felt that way. Then something happened. It surprised me. I felt something hard underneath. It was a blanket. Unexpectedly, my heart began to race. I tried to stay calm to remind myself that he was just my son, or maybe he wasn't. I didn't even realize. I lay there trying to ignore myself. If you want me to tell you the rest of my life, please subscribe to my channel so that I can feel good and continue. Thank you in advance. I told myself it was just an awkward moment, a momentary, awkward moment. I thought it would pass. It would pass. But as the minutes passed, I realized that everything was different and I didn't know what to do. Lenny stayed close to me. My breathing was regular, but I could feel it. The heat between us was growing. If you want to access more of my private stories, you can sign up on the join button and support me and learn everything at the same time. At that moment, I felt trapped. I didn't even know exactly what I was feeling. Lenny stirred, lifting his head slightly. When he looked at me, there was a softness in his eyes. I'd never seen a look like that before, and I felt safe and nervous at the same time. At that moment, he didn't say anything other than his gaze, but I had the feeling he was asking me if everything was okay. I tried to smile, hoping it would ease the awkward feeling, but the silence only deepened. Lenny's hands settled deeper into my arm, warm and soft. The steady feel of them both comforted and worried me a little. His fingertips moved lightly, almost imperceptibly, such a small thing. But every touch seemed to spark something inside me. Unable to do anything inside me, I ignored it, trying to keep my breathing steady, not to show him that my heart was breaking. I didn't know what to do, what to say, but I kept lying there. I tried to feel completely at peace, wrapped in a strange connection. Please subscribe to my channel to support me. I told myself that between us, it was only one thing. The mother consoles her son, nothing else. But in the silence, in the emptiness, where it was just the two of us, my mind kept going round and round. He was my son, but lying there, so close to him, I suddenly felt a deeper closeness. I didn't realize what was happening. A mixture, confusion, and warmth unexpectedly enveloped me. The feeling that immobilized me was not Lenny. He seemed to recognize my struggle. He stood next to me, his hand moving softly, as if it was the most natural thing, comforting. His breath was the only thing in the world. He closed his calm eyes again, and I wondered if he had fallen asleep. But then his hand moved slowly upwards. I felt a shiver on my arm. She opened her eyes and looked straight in. There was a question in my gaze. If he was asking if this was appropriate, I felt the same strange pull he felt. He whispered his name, barely audible. I wanted to stop the word, to move away and create some distance, but I couldn't release the tension. Between us, it was so strong, like a silent bond. A storm was brewing in the silence. Even though we didn't speak, the air was full. If you want me to tell you the rest of my life, please subscribe to my channel so that I can feel good and continue. Thank you in advance. As if it was the most natural thing, he leaned towards my heart. This thing haunted me. I was competing, but I couldn't force myself to do it. When I pulled back, I felt torn, caught between the role of mother and the strange feelings that surfaced as she leaned into me. I felt my breath catch and every thought was gone. Between us, Lenny's hand rested gently on my shoulder, his fingers playing lightly. If he was hesitating too, everything around us was distant, and I was just focusing on the warmth of his presence. I could almost hear the steady beating of his heart. I closed my eyes, trying to calm myself. I told myself that I had to deal with this confusing feeling of closeness. Crying overwhelmed me, but then, moving his hand slightly upwards, he brushed a lock of my hair. I must admit that it was a simple act of compassion, but it still hurt my heart. I didn't understand. I opened my eyes and there he was looking at me. There was such softness, such trust. His face was so close and I could see every little detail, the little freckles, the curve of his gently curved mouth, the shape of his eyes. There was a vulnerability in my gaze. In his gaze, I could see the same lostness. In that moment, we remained as we were, suspended in such silence that it was as if time itself had stopped. If you want to access my more special stories, you can become a member from the Join button and support me and learn. There were questions of doubt about what I couldn't do. It made sense, but my body wasn't moving. I felt drawn to this person. Everything grew, but I still felt like someone. That moment was completely new to me. At the time, I thought we would remain frozen, a silence that would last forever. Lenny stepped back and looked, slightly breaking the trance. Almost pulling away, he blushed and gave a shaky laugh. He rubbed the back of his neck, bringing me back to reality for a second. I realized how close we were. He took a deep breath, trying to calm himself. The wave of emotion inside me. I hope he didn't notice. I'm sorry, he said softly. His voice was full of uncertainty. I didn't want to do anything. Strangely, I avoided G, I think it's the person's name, and saw that he seemed to have some colour in his cheeks. I was struggling with the same thing. I was confused. I wanted to comfort him. I wanted to tell him that everything was okay, but the words stuck in my throat. He didn't know what to say, and for the first time in a long time, I felt awkward around my own son. I reached out to him. I put my hand on his shoulder and gave him a small smile, hoping to comfort him. If you want me to tell you the rest of my life, please subscribe to my channel so I can feel better and continue. It's okay, I told Lenny, my voice soft and determined. It's just fine. It's been us for a long time. We're both probably just feeling a little lost. I nodded and saw a glimmer of relief in his eyes. Then the tension began to fade. The doorbell rang. A sudden noise threw us both back into our room. Whatever spell had been cast, it was broken. My heart was still racing, but I made my way out. I was grateful that the door had been interrupted. When I opened it, I found Mark, our neighbour. Mark was a friendly guy who was always there. So he said he needed help. He smiled, but his eyes stayed on me a little longer than usual, and I realised I still had that strange feeling, the energy of the moment with Lenny. I tried to pull myself together, hoping he wouldn't. "Hey, Elise, have you noticed anything unusual?" he said. "And I'm going to see if you need anything, I know. It's been a bit colder lately, and if you have any heating problems, I can help." As I picked them up, I felt a strange wave of relief wash over me, and I let myself go for a moment. "Oh, thank you, Mark," I replied, relieved. "I'm smiling, actually. Yes, I'll take one. It's a bit cold, really. I'd appreciate it." I stepped inside, and I could feel Lenny, his face unreadable as he watched us from the corridor. For a second, I saw something in his eyes, a glimmer of something akin to jealousy. Although he tried to hide it immediately, it surprised and intrigued me. He was feeling more than he wanted to admit. As Mark walked round to check on the heater, he asked me questions about how things were going. We were home, we made small talk, but I kept looking at Lenny, who remained silent. We were both watching awkwardly. I could feel the discomfort of his intensity, and it added a new layer to the tension. I felt torn as I tried to make things easier with Mark in the room, with Lenny's gaze aware of his presence. After a few minutes, Mark turned to me with a warm smile. "Okay, everything looks good here, Elise. Call me if you need any more help." I thanked him and felt good as I left, the tension between Lenny and me growing even more. I closed a thicker door and turned round to see him standing there, arms crossed, his expression serious. "Are you all right, Lenny?" I asked, trying to figure out what was going on. "If you want access to my more private stories, you can sign up on the join button and support me and find out everything." "I'm fine," he said, his voice calm. "Yeah, I'm fine." I didn't expect Mark to come round. That's all I wanted to get through to him, to find out what was going on between us. But before I could say anything more, he walked past me and into his room. Without another word, the door closed. I walked softly behind him and stood there, feeling a strange mixture of relief, confusion, and lingering unease. Something unfinished just standing there. Looking at Lenny's closed door feeling was an ache I couldn't quite understand. My mind was preoccupied with everything. Our closeness was new. He shared how his gaze lingered on Mark when he was there, and it was evoking a strange, unspoken feeling of tension, just waiting for bubble again. I went to our room. In bed, I was reliving everything I knew over and over again. I couldn't ignore it forever, but at the same time, I didn't know how to face the moment. So instead, I just sat there, and the silence spoke for both of us. Finally, he took a deep breath and looked in. "Maybe just what we need is to take a step back and think," he said. "Okay," I said. Everything I said gentle. It's okay to feel close, but it's also okay to need. There was space to understand something. He nodded, leaning his head on my shoulder, slowly, but then rising in surprise. "If you want me to tell you the rest of my life, please subscribe to my channel so that I can feel good and continue. Thank you in advance." It felt comforting and familiar, but still that awkward edge. I couldn't. I ignored it. I felt my heart soften, and I put my arm around his shoulder, pulling him close to me. I closed it in a way that felt safe. It wasn't exactly, although I knew the questions between us. I answered them for the first time in a while. For the first time. Maybe we didn't think it was necessary. All the answers are correct. Now we can do this step by step. Solve something together. It even happened. It was complicated. And as we sat there, holding on to each other, I felt a feeling, a calm hope that whatever happens, we will find our way through it. We just sat there together, as if the whole mess was quietly together. Everything between us could disappear just by existing. The warmth between us was so simple, like a comforting yet uncomfortable feeling just below the surface. None of it. After a while, we could ignore Lenny. He raised his head and looked at me with a serious expression. "Mum, I don't know what to do. I don't want to do it with these feelings. Things are harder for us, but I can't ignore it." His words hung heavily in my head. The air was like a question he didn't dare to ask. I swallowed loudly, my mind racing as I searched to say the right thing, but when I opened my mouth, there was another one. We knocked on the door, both of us jumped, startled, and looked at each other. We were caught. I was caught off guard. The hit was almost hard, as if whoever was on the other side knew something urgent was happening. I stood up on a sudden wave of nervousness, and when I opened the door, Mark stood there, again, and looked round. Worried. "Elise, I'm sorry to bother you. I just thought I'd check in. Everything was fine. You seemed fine." I looked at Lenny a moment ago, his face watching us closely. It was unreadable. I tried to keep my voice steady. I answered, "If you want access to my more private stories, you can sign up on the join button and support me and find out everything." "Thanks, Mark, but we're just having a quiet evening." Mark looked at me and then walked past me. Lenny's gaze, thoughtful. "Okay, but don't forget I'm right next door if you need me." After he left, I closed the door and turned to Lenny, who was still there, watching me in the same way. Intensity stood up, walking slowly. He came slowly towards me, and I felt my heart. The air between us racing again, thick with everything unsaid, but at the same time. It reached me. He stopped his expression. He fidgeted as if he was fighting. Maybe we shouldn't push," he said quietly, his voice wavering. "Maybe we need time," I nodded, my heart aching with the same conflicting emotions. "Hearings are right, lean, we both need it. Let's think about everything, let's not rush." He nodded and we stood there, as if we were on the road, close but careful, the edge of something we can't control. It was an end, but it was also a beginning. It was something we couldn't quite define, and as we walked towards his room, I wondered. If you're wondering what the future holds for us, write to us in case you'd like to hear the rest of our story. Let us know in the comments below and we'll share on requests what happens next.